If the SEC truly is all about winning those battles in the trenches, then LSU fans should feel pretty good about winning those battles moving forward.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out on YouTube as well. Search Locked On LSU in that YouTube search bar and hit the red subscribe button, and you'll get notified as soon as new episodes of the podcast drop. But appreciate you for being here and always appreciate you for making us your first listen every single day. Well, let's get into it because this is something that we've been touching on a lot, but it simply does not get old. It's the same topic, but new news, even more commitments in the 2025 class. LSU has an incredibly stacked class in 2025. Of course, we knew the number one quarterback and the number one overall player in the class of 2025, Bryce Underwood, has committed to LSU. DeCorian Moore, the number one wide receiver in the 2025 class, has committed to LSU. Harlem Berry, the number one running back in the 2025 class. All three of those are 5 stars. All three have committed to play for LSU. Earlier this week, we learned that 4-star cornerback in New Iberia, Louisiana kid Jabari Antoine has committed to LSU as well. And there is yet another one. Devin Harper has announced his commitment to LSU. He announced on Tuesday afternoon that he plans to play college ball at LSU, a 4-star interior offensive lineman from Shreveport. He is the number 3 prospect in the state of Louisiana in the 2025 class behind Harlem Berry and Jabari Antoine. 2 players that you have already locked up. Of course, they haven't signed the national letters of intent, but 2 players that you have already gotten commitments from. He's the 6th ranked interior offensive lineman in the country. He's 6'5", 300 pounds. The kid is freaking massive. 6'5", 300 pounds, like you're pushing NFL size. He's 17 years old. So, I mean, just the build alone, like the God-given talent alone, my goodness, that is hard to ignore. And I know that he's only going to get bigger and stronger once he actually gets on campus, but he's a junior in high school right now. 6'5", 300 pounds. I mean, my goodness. So Devin Harper, Calvary Baptist in Shreveport, has committed to LSU. This is massive for so many reasons. And every time a player from the state of Louisiana, with the caliber of a player like that, a 4-star, a 5-star, one of the top players in the state, I will continue to reiterate this point. And if you listen to the podcast every day, if you are an everydayer, first of all, thank you so much. Thank you for always sticking around and supporting the podcast. But the second point is, you probably heard me say this, but I feel the need to reiterate it because it is so important. And it is a point that I don't think should be lost on us as LSU fans. That you are absolutely cleaning up in the state of Louisiana. What did Brian Kelly say when he got the job at LSU? I want to lock down the state. I want to build with players within the state of Louisiana, and we'll supplement. We're not going to just be confined within the borders of our own state. We'll get talent from other states, absolutely. But what we can't do is allow in-state talent to go to Alabama, to Texas A&M, to Florida, to Georgia, so on and so forth. You can't have that. Too much of that was going on at LSU in recent years. So right now, in the 2025 class, you have gotten commitments from 4 of the top 5 players in the state. Of course, I mentioned Harlem Berry and Jabari Antoine. Those are, and in Devin Harper, this new commitment in the state in Shreveport interior offensive lineman. He's at number 3. James Simon is the one in the top 5 that has not yet committed, but every single crystal ball says LSU. Every person and recruiting insider that I have talked to has said, yeah, he's probably going to go to LSU. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of when he's going to name the commitment or make his commitment. And then rounding out the top 5 is Keelan Moses, a defensive player from U-High, Baton Rouge kid. Dylan Moses, his older brother, went to Alabama, and Keelan Moses has been a guy that committed early to LSU, and he's been a guy that's been really outspoken and vocal on social media about bringing other players in the 2025 class to LSU, being a recruiter really in his own right, and being really outspoken about how excited he is about being at LSU, about being a leader at LSU, kind of some of the responsibilities that Brian Kelly put on him. So that's one guy that I'm really excited to get to learn more about. But that's 4 of the 5 top players in the state that you have now gotten commitments from in the 2025 class. That is massive. I looked back at some of the recruiting classes in the past regimes, and honestly, it made me roll my eyes into the back of my head because it was so freaking disappointing and frustrating. Look at the 2017 recruiting class. The number 1 player in the state of Louisiana is a kid from Amite. His name is Devontae Smith. You might have heard of him. He went to Alabama. He also won a Heisman Trophy at Alabama. He won a national championship at Alabama. Number 2 player in the 2017 class, Christopher Allen to Southern Lab in Baton Rouge, inside linebacker, went to Alabama. 3 and 4, Tyler Shelvin, Todd Harris, those 2 ended up at LSU. 5th ranked player in the state in 2017 went to Mississippi State. Number 6 went to Florida. Number 7 went to Alabama. Number 8, guy by the name of Travis Etienne, went to Clemson. He ended up being pretty good at Clemson. Number 9 went to Baylor. You see what I mean? That was the top 9 players in the state of Louisiana. You landed 2 of them. And a whole heck of a lot of those players that didn't go to LSU, they ended up being pretty darn good where they ended up. And of course, that was a particularly not so great year. Of course, there were kids that were, top ranked in the state that did end up going to LSU. But it has never felt like there is as much of an emphasis on in-state recruiting, at least in recent years. And in recent years, I'm talking, let's say, 5 to 10 years. There's never been as much of an emphasis on in-state recruiting, nor has there been as much success on in-state recruiting. You're not going to land every kid in the state of Louisiana. You're not. You're going to lose a couple to Texas and to Georgia and to Alabama because that's just simply what happens, especially now that we're living in the era of NIL. But looking at the 24 class, you get 9 of the top 10, 10 of the top 11. 4 of the top 5 so far, and from everything that I've heard, we can expect 5 of the top 5 to come to LSU in the 2025 class. That's huge. There's another aspect of this as well that I think is massive for LSU, and especially at one position group moving forward, a position group that is going to be a massive position of need. It is now, and the need grows only more after this season. We'll get into that coming up after this, after just a couple of words from our sponsors. All right, I want to tell you about FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all of those who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday, it's all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks. Personally, my favorite, buffalo chicken dip, can't go wrong. And it's also about placing some super bets. So one bet that I am looking at that's kind of been a cheat code all season long, it's Christian McCaffrey anytime touchdown score. It almost feels like free money at this point. That's what I'm going to do, but you can do it how you want to do it. And there are so many ways to bet on FanDuel. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a dub. or 2 or 3 or maybe even more than that. So new customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit fanduel.com/locked on to sign up. That is fanduel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. All right, rolling along here on Locked On LSU. We're a part of the Locked On Network, your team every single day. Plus, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, LSU lands a commitment from four-star interior offensive lineman from Shreveport, Devin Harper. Devin Harper is the number 3 overall player in the state of Louisiana, the number 6 ranked interior offensive lineman in the 2025 class. One part of that is massive is you are just continuing to clean up in the state of Louisiana. You are locking down the borders of the state of Louisiana. One massive push from Brian Kelly and this entire coaching regime. The second thing, maybe a little bit less holistic, a little bit more X's and O's. You're adding offensive line depth, and that is a position that you desperately need depth at. Not just now. Like, you can always use offensive line depth now, especially since Lance Hurd is not going to be that kind of go-to third tackle. Lance Hurd, of course, transferring to Tennessee this upcoming season, but also because you're most likely losing 4 out of your 5 starters on the offensive line after this season. Will Campbell, I'm going to guess he's probably a top 5, top 10 pick. He's probably not sticking around for another year. Emery Jones also is eligible for the draft. I wouldn't expect him to come back for his 4th year of eligibility. Garrett Dellinger, Miles Frazier, they are all good to go after this upcoming season. Now, Garrett Dellinger and Miles Frazier, I don't know off the top of my head how many years of eligibility those two have left. I was honestly surprised to see them come back, pleasantly surprised to see them come back this season. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them ultimately decide to declare for the NFL draft after this upcoming season. So you are going to have to find, more likely than not, in my opinion, 4 new starters on the offensive line. And you're not just replacing Joe Schmo. Like, you're replacing 2 tackles that have started since their true freshman season. All-American tackles. Those aren't easy shoes to fill. Those aren't just shoes that you can fill overnight. I mean, we've seen, like Will Campbell and Emery Jones, they're the exception and they are not the rule. That true freshmen don't start at that position. And even them, 2 All-Americans that struggled in their first few games, which was to be expected when you're a true freshman and you're getting your first taste of college football, when you're getting your first taste of going one-on-one against a 285-pound D lineman. So you're going to be replacing 4 out of your 5 starters more likely than not. And like I mentioned, you're not going to have Lance Hurd. Constantly having a cycle of quality and talented offensive linemen that you have recruited very heavily, I think is key. Because you don't want to be caught in a position that you go into the 2025 season and say, dang it, like we don't have anyone to fill in after Will Campbell left or so on and so forth. No, you want to know exactly what your plan is. Okay, Will, Emery, they're out. This is who we're going to be filling in. You've got a young core of offensive linemen, either finishing up their true freshman season this past year or coming in the 2024 class, whether it's a Bo Bordelon or a DJ Chester or a Cohen Eccles or a Kyrie Lee that's coming in the 2024 class. So you have a young core, a young group that I think Brad Davis is probably really excited to be able to work with. They're just not going to be starters right now. They're eventually going to have to be. So adding Devin Harper into the mix, it just continues to add in more depth, and getting a few offensive linemen every single year in every single class is key to accommodate for all the talent that you're going to be losing every single year. not just to the transfer portal, but also, unfortunately, for injury, for transfer portal, so on and so forth. In NFL draft, obviously, of course. I think another thing, too, is looking back at the past few years, and I'm really just looking at the Brian Kelly season, so 2022 to now, LSU has landed the number one, the highest rated offensive lineman in each of those classes. 2022, Will Campbell. 2023, Lance Hurd. Now, you weren't able to hold on to Lance Hurd. There was really, in my opinion, probably nothing that you could have done about that. He wanted something that you couldn't offer. Lance Hurd wanted to start. You're not going to start Lance Hurd over Will Campbell and Emery Jones. He's going to Tennessee. You at least landed him, couldn't hold on to him. That's natural attrition. 2024, Kyrie Lee, like I just mentioned, number one offensive lineman in the state of Louisiana. And now in 2025, Devin Harper. Offensive line talent matters. Offensive line depth matters. It's not the sexiest position to talk about because they're not scoring touchdowns and they're not putting points on the board. But I think that we would be selling the offensive line short if we didn't attribute Jaden Daniels' season this past year, at least a little bit, to the five guys in front of him with their hands in the dirt blocking for him, creating holes that he could run through, giving him time in the pocket. That takes absolutely, positively nothing away from Jaden Daniels and what he was able to do and how freaking electric he was this past season. But quarterbacks can't do what they do, and they can't do it at the highest level that they are capable of if they're getting sacked in a second and a half. In 2019, you had the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. I think those things go hand in hand. Offensive line is so important, and continuing to supplement your offensive line room with young talent is so, so key. So overall, my takeaway from the past few weeks and really just the past couple of days, you've landed two of the top 5 players in the state of Louisiana in the 2025 class in just the last 3 days. So this 2025 class, I think, is in great shape. Again, it's a little bit of a delayed satisfaction because it is 2025. We got a whole 2024 class, an entire 2024 season, an entire 2024 off season before we get there. But the future looks so incredibly bright for Brian Kelly and his new coaching staff. All right, coming up next, I did promise that Mailbag Wednesdays are coming back, and I am a woman of my words. We will get right into your questions coming up next after just a few words from our sponsors. All right, I want to tell you about Jase Case. So I know that we all come here to get out of the crazy realities of real life. That's why we love sports. But let's just talk for a minute about preparing for real life. According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. I mean, this is scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if a loved one of mine got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from the life-saving medication that they needed. But thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jase Medical. They provide the Jase Case, which is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among so many others. I mean, this stuff can happen to any of us. So visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It'll be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off of your order. All right, rolling along here, Locked on LSU. Let's get into some Mailbag Wednesday. We are back, baby. We got away from Mailbag Wednesday there for a little bit, just in the craziness of the regular season, and then it was signing day, and then it was transfer portal season, and the coaches got fired, and then Mike Denbrock left. It's been crazy. It's been a crazy past few months, but we are back into your questions here on a Mailbag Wednesday. So just a reminder, we do this every week. We'll do this every Wednesday. If you have a question, feel free to comment it down below on YouTube, or feel free to send those questions in on Twitter. You can send them to me on my personal account at Caroline Fenton 1, or you can send them in on the podcast Twitter at Locked On LSU. But let's get into it. First and foremost, this was a question on the YouTube page. Ghost Walker commented about the Kayshon Boutte situation. So remember late last week, it was the news was broken that Kayshon Boutte, of course, former LSU wide receiver, had been arrested for gambling using a fake account and gambling underage. And there had also been evidence that he was gambling while he was at LSU underage, and also gambling when you are an NCAA athlete. Gambling of any kind, sports betting of any kind, is not allowed. So there was reports that he placed over 9,000 bets in the span of 13 months. Whoever did the math comes out to 23 bets a day, nearly a bet an hour. Just crazy, astronomical. But he was making those bets while he was at LSU, playing for LSU, and he was even placing bets on LSU football and some bets even on himself. There was a report that said that one of his bets was a parlay, and two legs of that parlay was in the Florida State game, over 82.5 receiving yards for himself and a touchdown for himself. Obviously, we know neither of those things happen. But Ghost Walker asked the question, I kind of find it odd that nobody connected why Boutte was so pissed after that Florida State game with this. He dropped 2 touchdowns and would have easily hit both marks on his parlay. I don't know if this is like a joke or not. And if it is, then totally disregard what I'm saying. But if that is a serious sentiment that you find it odd that nobody kind of connected the pieces, the way that I view it is when I saw Boutte so visibly pissed off and upset on the sideline. We all remember the video of Jaden Daniels kind of talking him off a ledge, kind of talking him through it. I looked at that and I said, that's a competitor that's just pissed off that he dropped 2 touchdowns. That's a competitor that was supposed to have a breakout season, that was projected to be a top 5, top 10 NFL draft pick, and he had 2 catches for 20 yards. That's why I thought he was pissed. Why would I have any reason to believe that he felt anything different? Never once did I think, or would I expect anyone to think, man, I wonder if he's so mad about dropping all those balls because he just lost some money on himself. Of course, we didn't think that. Of course, we all thought that he was just upset with his own play. Why would we have any reason to think differently? And it does feel kind of like a duh moment now that we have all the information, and looking back, we can kind of put the pieces together. But I don't know why anyone, for any reason, why anyone would believe that that was because of a bet. I mean, if you did think that, then you're a much smarter person than I am. Another question that that's on me. We simply have not dedicated quite enough time to men's hoops. But one person asks on Twitter, how worried are you about LSU basketball? Men's basketball. Look, it hasn't been the best stretch of games for LSU basketball. You lose 3 games in a row. Not ideal. You start off the season with a big win on the road at Texas A&M. You're kind of feeling yourself. And then you drop a close game against Georgia. You get blown out by Alabama on the road just a couple days ago. And I don't think the final score is necessarily indicative of how that game went. It was close until it wasn't. You lose a close game at home against Texas A&M the week prior. 3 losses in a row after you were able to take down Ole Miss, where the team looked really, really solid. I'm not overly concerned about LSU because I said last year, and I'm holding myself to it, and I'll hold you to it as well. I was going to give Matt McMahon 2 years. 2 years before I got really critical, because the program that he took over, I mean, that was in a state of disarray. My goodness. He had to rebuild that entire team, and he had to do it in the face of several NCAA violations. That's not an easy job, especially in a conference that's only getting better and better year over year. I mean, the SEC basketball right now is an absolute freaking blast. Like, on any given night, any underdog can pull off a massive upset. I mean, Tuesday night we saw South Carolina go to Thompson Bowling Arena or whatever it's called now in Knoxville, 14 and a half point underdogs, and they dominated Tennessee for a majority of that game. So the SEC is an incredibly competitive league. And I said last year, look, I'm not going to be overly critical about Matt McMahon until year 3. That's when we really need to start seeing true results show up in the win and loss column. All I was asking for going into this year was, do we see progress? Is this a team that is playing its heart out night in and night out? I would say, yeah, they are. Are we starting to see more of the identity of this team? Yeah, I would say that we are. This is a team that wants to shoot 3. And in a lot of these losses, it just comes down to the final few seconds and the ball isn't bouncing your way. Like those last final few seconds against Georgia at Georgia, that was a blast of a game. I thought Matt McMahon drew up a great play at the end of the game, just didn't go in. Now those excuses or reasonings rather of just didn't go in, those aren't going to fly after a certain point. But I think that we as fans owe it to Matt McMahon to give him time to really show those results. And I think that fair amount of time is 2 seasons. But I have seen progress from this team from year 1 to year 2. But last year, this team was pretty brutal. It's pretty brutal. This year, it's a better team. They're still in the bottom third of the SEC, but I'm at least encouraged. And I think that they have the right guy in Matt McMahon. But I'm allowed to change my mind on that. I am. But thanks to everybody who sent in those questions. Apologize that I couldn't get into more, but we will continue to get into Mailbag Wednesdays every single week. So make sure you get those questions in any day of the week, but we'll get to them on Wednesdays. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU, the NCAA is investigating 2 teams in the SEC, 3 Power 5 programs across college football. Now, they are not investigating LSU yet. What does it mean for LSU? We'll get into that coming up next on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.